Before we kick off this video, Hyundai are actually giving away a brand new XPeng G9 electric SUV. All you have to do is download the app and then have 2 friends sign up. Use the referral code CHRISRIFA to get 500 bonus starting points. Link down below. These are 2 of very few 3-row 7-seat electric SUVs on sale, at least here in Europe. The BYD Tang first came out in 2018 and came to Norway as an EV in 2021. This is the facelifted version called the flagship, with a new front end and a bigger battery pack and new features on the inside. And then we have the Kia EV9, which came out in late 2023 or early 2024 and is still a very new competitor on the market. This is built on a dedicated EV platform. This is not. This is, though, even fully spec'd, about $10,000 or euros cheaper than an equivalent EV9. So in this video, we're going to compare the two on the exterior, on the interior. We're going to take them out on the road and we're going to see is this worth 100,000 kroners more, and if not, should you get this instead? When I first tested the Tang back in late 2021, I thought it looked like an attractive SUV with nice flowing lines and a pretty front end. This new facelifted model is a step in the wrong direction, and I don't think it looks pretty anymore, but rather boring and bland, not offensive, not ugly, but just totally forgettable. What is curious is that this new facelifted model has actually grown 10 centimeters in length, but all of that has to be in the nose. They probably did that to improve aerodynamics, but they haven't quoted a better drag coefficient number with this facelift, so it's still at 0.34 CD, which is not great. The EV9, on the other hand, may look like a big non-aerodynamic box, but with a drag coefficient of 0.28 CD, it is, believe it or not, a lot more aerodynamic than the Tang. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but is big and bold and makes a statement everywhere it goes. I think it does look great, though from some angles it does look a little bit more like a minivan than an SUV. Many of you may think that I am a brand snob, which I very well may be. But Kia has always had a special place in my heart because my very first job as a 13-year-old was actually at a Kia dealer every Saturday for years. I've closely followed their journey from a cheap car manufacturer to becoming a leader in EV tech and design with their newest vehicles. I love how they have become one of the coolest Asian brands out there. There's quite a bit of a step in height getting into the Tang, and that is because the battery pack in the floor here takes up quite a bit of space, because this is not built on a dedicated platform like the EV9. So there's quite a bit of a step in height, so if you find it hard to enter cars that are taller, or maybe you're on the shorter side, that is something to consider. But with that being said, that also means the floor is higher and that you have a really nice car-like seating position in this car. And that, in combination with these seats, which are super comfortable, I really like the quilted pattern, and this faux leather material is actually really nice. And there's a lot of adjustment in the steering wheel, so I can get it as close as I want, and I don't feel like I'm sitting over the steering wheel, because the angle is very car-like. So I really like the seating position and the driving position in this car. And you still sit high because you are sitting high off the ground. So you have, that commanding SUV, towering view over other cars. So I really like that. And also, yes, the cabin is smaller and more cramped compared to the EV9. It's not as spacious, but it's also at the same time more cozy and more cockpit-like, and I prefer that feeling to the EV9, which can feel, a little bit more open and airy. This just feels more cozy. I prefer this. And also really nice, elbow position, and the steering wheel, I can get it as close as I want. So, I just like sitting in this car. You get a good feeling behind the steering wheel. But with that being said, the cabin is very dated compared to the EV9, and it's a mixture of, you know, cheap materials with nice materials and also very cheap feeling switchgear that looks expensive on the surface. Like some of the switches here just feel cheap. The window switches feel cheap. This is just, you know, very cheap plastics around in the cabin, though you do have, you know, really nice like suede types of materials here on the dashboard and also this aluminum trim here. Yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag, but overall I do like it. Though the glossy black plastic here on the center console is just terrible. It's already scratched and looks really, really bad. And there's a lot of room here. It is a big SUV, but if you have longer legs, just keep in mind that, you know, the dashboard is quite close here with the center console. Like I have about this much, so if I were very long, yeah, that may be an issue. The second row in the Tang is surprisingly roomy. Considering that this has an almost 30 centimeter shorter wheelbase than the EV9, I wasn't expecting this much room for adults. I'm 180 centimeters with shoes on and I have plenty of knee room. Headroom is also very generous and the floor is completely flat, so you can even sit an adult in the middle here, and the cabin is actually quite wide. But let's slide up this seat so I can just about fit with my knees and see if I can fit behind myself in the third row. So getting into the third row is actually quite easy. You pull this lever here and then you slide this seat forward, and the opening is actually not too bad, though, because of that high, you know, step in height. And the roof, you're going to have to crawl and step in like that. And behind myself in the third row, let's see if I could pull this seat here. I don't know, it doesn't look promising. Okay, there we go. Well, actually, that is surprising. Actually, I fit behind myself just with half a centimeter clearance, but I wouldn't want to sit here for a long period of time because, yeah, you're sitting basically on the floor, though headroom is actually not too bad for me at 180 centimeters. There is a big difference in step-in height in the EV9 compared to the Tang, because this is much more like a crossover, just a little bit taller vehicle. It doesn't feel like, you know, a proper SUV in that sense, like the BYD Tang. So that's both a negative and a positive. And I think when you're sitting behind the wheel, you're not sitting as high. But with that being said, this is a very different cabin and interior experience compared to that Tang. First off, despite these two cars having very similar exterior dimensions, this is a lot bigger on the inside. I mean, it is apparent just stepping into the front cabin how much bigger this car is. I mean, the dashboard is further away from you. There's a lot more headroom. The windscreen is further away from you. The rake of the windscreen is much more angled. And also the width of the cabin, you know, just the space in between the seat and the doors and the center console. This is like 2 classes bigger from the interior. It's what it feels like, at least. And also, despite the interior not being as blingy, looking as premium, I think it's a more honest interior. Like, I really like the matte finishes of, you know, the switches, the buttons, except on the steering wheel. This is a glossy finish, but it's not glossy black. It's glossy to match this blue interior. So this is the top of the line GT line, no pun intended. And it comes in this new, like, dark bluish green interior color, and I really, really like it. You know, I'm a sucker for anything than a dark or black interior. And the fact that they've just matched all the colors so perfectly, like the plastics, the, you know, the materials on top of the dashboard, this faux leather, which is the nicest non-real leather, non-animal leather in the business. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look, it's not as visually pleasing, this interior, but I think, like, from a quality standpoint, it's much more coherent. Like the switches across the dashboard, everything just feels solid. It doesn't feel, you know, premium like a Porsche, but it's not meant to. It is a really nice interior. And despite it having a lot of buttons, it's very easy to use. Like when I jumped into the BYD for the first time, I was overwhelmed. But everything is just simple. You have, you know, your heated steering wheel, your heated seats, your memory seats on the doors. You have all your buttons here for your audio, for your media, for your driver assistance systems. It's all very easy to use. And I love the fact that you have, you know, physical buttons for the HVAC. But it isn't perfect. First off, these seats aren't as comfortable, not nearly as comfortable as the seats in that BYD Tang. I've driven both of these two cars extensively over longer trips, and yeah, the BYD's seats are much better. And also, I can't get a comfortable, good driving position like in that BYD Tang. I'm as close as I want to be with my legs, but I feel like I'm sitting on top of the car on a bus and there's not enough reach in the steering wheel. Look at this, guys. Like my wrist here should be on top of the steering wheel, and even though like the angle of the seat back is quite abrupt, I feel like I'm driving a bus. If there was just like 5 or 10 centimeters more reach in the steering wheel, that would solve everything. And also, all of the screens, look how far everything. So when you want to do something on the screen, you have to hunch forward, which is just weird. So it's just, you know, despite, you know, it having physical buttons, which I really do like, and the layout, like ergonomically, it's also kind of a mismatch. And also the screens being further away and smaller, it's just a little bit weird. But with that being said, I think I prefer the interior here, but I prefer the driving position in the Tang. These rear doors are some of the largest rear doors I've ever operated in any car. So like if you have kids, just make sure they know how wide these are, because it's going to be easy to hit, you know, cars when you're parking. These are huge. So this is the GT line, and this is the GT line with the 6-seat configuration. You can have this as a 7-seater also. And this second row is just, yeah, there's no competition in between this and the Tang, because the Tang, you can't even have it this way. And in the second row, it is even more apparent how much bigger this cabin is. I mean, it feels like a much larger vehicle, and that is a lot due to the wheelbase being almost 30 centimeters longer. So you have these captain chairs like this, like for like an Uber or like a second row, I don't know, like a limo with a driver and sitting in the second row. This could get really comfortable. You know, you have a lot of practicality here. Also, you have this like this table, and I think there's like a bin in here also. You have, I think there's a cup holder for each of the passengers. This having 6 seats, there are 6 cup holders. It's just huge. And also the view out of the front window, the greenhouse, this is massive. Climate control up here on the roof with your own vents here. It's just a completely different experience. And also, if that wasn't enough, the second row seats are electrically adjustable. So you can just recline. Yeah, you can really find a comfortable position here. So let's hop into the rear. Let's slide this seat all the way up. And this seat is in my driving position. So let's get this all the way up and see how much room. Okay, so it doesn't go any closer. So like in the furthest most position, actually, look at that. I have, you know, decent leg room. I don't know if I would want to sit here for a longer trip, but let's hop into the rear. And what's really cool here is that this is a 6-seater, so I can just step in here. I don't have to, you know, faffle with this seat. Okay, so this is pretty cool. You have this button here, and then you have the similar button on top of the seat back, and you press that once, and it just moves the seat forward automatically, one-touch operation. That is pretty nice and neat. And then you can just easily step into the third row like this. So once in the third row, it's actually not more roomy than the BYD Tang when it comes to knee room. Like, I'm pretty much sitting with my knees up against the seat back, so for me at least, there isn't any more room. But what there is that you're sitting much higher up off the floor, so it's a much more comfortable seating position. And headroom also is more generous. And also you have cup holders here. Yeah, you even have USB-C ports. And what you can do is that you can always, you know, just slide your legs over the middle here, like in between these seats, and then you can actually be comfortable. But I'm surprised that, you know, the trunk behind here is 333 liters. I'm surprised that you can't slide the third row just a little bit so adults can sit behind adults. I'm 180 centimeters with shoes, 5'11". So people over 6 foot, they're not going to fit in the third row of the EV9. What I like to take a look at in my videos that I think more channels should do and very few people actually do is look at something I call driver ergonomics or the driver ecosystem. A lot of channels, a lot of journalists like to take a look at, for example, the infotainment system as one system, and if it's good like within a Tesla, like it works fine. But I like to look at all the switchgear, all the buttons, all the ways you interact with a car, buttons down here, steering wheel buttons and window switches as one ecosystem, because it doesn't matter if you have the best infotainment system in the world, but you have to do mirror adjustments or you have to do, simple functions in the screen and in a submenu. I don't think that counts for a good infotainment system or a good driver ergonomic experience or a good ecosystem. So first off, I mean, it looks kind of good with this car because you have a lot of physical buttons here on the steering wheel. You have your cruise control buttons over here. You also have your audio switches. You have traditional stalks behind the steering wheel. You have one here for your wipers, and you have one here for your washers. And then down here by the door, you have window switches, you have mirror switches, and then you have memory settings. Though you can't set one while you're moving, you have to stop the car and then you can set it, which is really weird to say one. And then down here you have a traditional gear selector, which I actually like. You have your park button there, and then you just move it, that way to go into drive. The car's charging now, that's why it won't let us go into drive. And then this is really nice, this volume knob here. That is really nice, start stop button, and then you have some shortcuts, drive modes down here. So, on the surface, though, some of the buttons here feel cheap, and this is, already looks terrible, this glossy black plastic, that is nice. Though this charge button here doesn't do anything. And let's start with some of the oddities. Like now we're charging and this screen is nice, it's bright, but there's no traditional trip computer with this car. And also I can't show you the screens now, maybe I'll overlay some video. It's not very useful, and sometimes it defaults to some function when for example, it would default to a map when you don't want the map. They're just some oddities, but it's nice, it's bright. But this screen here, this is, kind of a mixed bag. And when I reviewed the BYD Tang for the first time more than 3 years ago, I talked about this being an Android tablet. And this is literally an Android tablet glued to the dashboard. And at the time, there were no built-in maps. Now there are built-in maps. And the maps route planner is kind of a mixed bag. I mean, for example, if you put in a destination, it will show you how much battery you will arrive with. And once you're on route, it doesn't tell you that information anymore, only when you choose to where to go to. But there is wireless Apple CarPlay, which is really nice. I mean, that is pretty decent. And also, let's see. Yeah, this is also weird. It goes full screen because there are no physical HVAC buttons. So you have to swipe up like that, and then you get that menu. But it goes away really quickly. So the only way to have that bottom bar there is to have to not use Apple CarPlay. So sometimes when you're in Apple CarPlay, you're using maps and you just want to adjust the temperature, you can swipe a bit too far, and then it doesn't happen now. That was strange. But then it doesn't center, and then you have to set. Yeah, there you go. You have to center it, right, like that. That's just weird. That's just weird. So I don't like that. But there are a few shortcuts, like down here. If you drop this down, it should show you how to turn off driver monitoring system, but that's gone now. There's also a dark mode and an auto mode. Now it's going to dark mode, and that's nice for nighttime, but it's so dim. Just look how much dimmer this screen is compared to that screen. Maybe not as apparent now, but when I go into light mode, it is really, really apparent. Look, that's light mode. And that's light mode. So when it's daytime, it's really hard to see anything on the screen. And also, these are really small, these buttons here, hard to hit when you're driving, and then this menu here will close too quickly sometimes, because if you want to press up there. And then you also have your heated steering wheel and seats in a submenu. Yeah, I don't like that.
But other than, some of these weird oddities, it's actually easy to use this car. The assistance systems here is fine going into your ADAS. And yeah, if you want to go into your turn off driver's monitoring system, you have to go into vehicle. And then you have to go over here to something called cabin perception. Then you can turn off your driver monitoring systems, which is really annoying and nagging in this car. It barely lets you look at the screen for more than 3 seconds. Also ADAS here to turn off, your emergency lane keep assist and your normal lane keep assist. And then also your, let's see, your intelligent speed limit warning. And also the HVAC controls. I mean, it's a normal thing that these Chinese cars, when they first came to Norway a few years ago, you had to run the HVAC at like 24, 25 degrees Celsius on the screen for the car to have a comfortable temperature. But now we can run it at like 21, 22, still a bit warmer than in every other car. But sometimes when it's light out, it just blows cold air, even though it's cold outside. So that is just weird. So I mean, it is better than what it was before. And now that you have built-in maps is really nice. Like the old one I had to like with an APK download Google Maps, which is just insane. But overall, I just wish, the switch gears were a little bit nicer to use. And also, some of these buttons actually had functionality. And also just give me a physical button for your heated steering wheel and heated seats. This would be a very good experience from behind the wheel. Very good. Now, how it is, it's good. Not very good, but good. We're now in the EV9, but I forgot to say that the DIN audio sound system that comes standard in the flagship model is actually very good. Very few complaints. My only complaint is that once you're going on the motorway, I wish it could just go a little bit louder. It goes loud, but sometimes when there's a lot of, tire noise and wind noise, if the road is bad, it's just not loud enough for me. I like to listen to loud music sometimes, and also just listening to podcasts. Sometimes it's hard to hear what people say if there's a lot of road noise and you can't, you can't turn up the sound system loud enough. But with that being said, it's actually pretty good. This has the Meridian sound system, and I don't remember this being as good as it is, because this is actually a very impressive sound system. I mean, on the surface, there's not, a lot of bass, and it's not as punchy, and I had to turn the bass up to the max for me to, have enough bass for the type of music I listen to. But the more music I listen to, it is so clear and crisp. Yes, there may not be, as much bass in, the low ends as in the DIN audio sound system in that car. But with that being said, it plays so crisp and clear and tight. And also, the mids are good here, but the highs are impressive. The vocals, yeah, this is an impressive sound system. So this is kind of an underdog. So I just want to get that out of the way. But okay, guys, we're now in the EV9. And also, this is, a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to driver ergonomics, because the infotainment system, kind of a small screen in a big car like this, not the best infotainment system, though, compared to the EV6, the EV9 has gotten a lot of improvements. This has the new one over the first generation of this we saw with the EV6 when it first came out a few years ago. But I really like the fact that there are a lot of, steering wheel buttons here, and these are clearly labeled. It's very logical and easy to use. So you have your, ADAS over here, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, and then you have your audio over here. You also can just hold this button here for a few seconds in this car's program to turn off the speed limit warning, and also this turns off lane keep assist, and also this is programmed to a shortcut where you go in, where you can turn off that driver assistance system or driver monitoring systems. All of these, which are just mandatory in the EU after July 2024, are just annoying. So it's really cool that just a few buttons you can press to turn off that. And also this has one pedal drive, so you have, the regen behind the steering wheel here, and also traditional stocks. You have your blinkers over here, you have your washers there, and then you have the gear selector down there, meaning you have a lot of space here. Here you also have a few shortcut buttons, though I wish this volume knob was here, because like you're resting your arm here, and the dashboard is so far away, like you have to reach. But I'm going to commend them for having one. And also you have physical buttons here for your temperatures, which is really nice, super easy to use. But you also have a dedicated panel over here, which from the driver position is a little bit hidden. So I wish they had moved, all of this maybe just a little bit over there or closer or just a bigger screen. Yeah. And also over here, you have traditional window switches and also mirror switches. You also have your heated steering wheel, cooled seats, heated seats, memory settings. But again, you can't hold this to save it while driving, which is annoying because sometimes like I want to adjust my driving position because like when I'm doing my movements for the mirrors or something like that, and then you have to remember to save it when you stop. I don't understand why Korean cars do this and Chinese cars do that. That is just weird. Also, you have, these touch capacitive buttons here to go to different shortcuts. Yeah, not the most responsive or the best, but I mean, they're okay. They're okay. Also, wireless Apple CarPlay. And this infotainment system, I mean, it looks nice, but it's not the easiest to use. Like, it's not my favorite infotainment system. It's not necessarily bad, but like, for example, your charge menu, where's that? EV, there you go. And then battery preconditioning, like there should be shortcuts easily available where you could just, do a drop down. But I know you can customize your home menu here or your maps menu. The guide Kia showed me. Yeah, you can do some shortcuts over here, which is really nice. Like, I mean, I'm not complaining, but like it's there are other infotainment systems that are easier to use and more intuitive and better just to navigate. Also, built-in navigation system, not the best, but it's okay. I mean, it's more the fact that the screen is small for being this big of a vehicle and the screen's being so far away. And also lastly, like there's nothing wrong with this driver display, but there's no map view. You can't have that map or Apple CarPlay here, which is really weird in 2025. But it's okay, it functions, this cabin, and this is why I talk about, the infotainment system isn't the be-all or end-all, because if you have physical buttons, if you have, knobs and switches and shortcuts and stuff like that, it still makes the car very easy and nice to use for your daily stuff. And that's where I think this car is better than that. I'm starting the driving portion of this video in the BYD Tang, and despite this being on a much older platform and this interior, feeling a lot more dated and cheapness here and there, especially with the switchgear and a few nasty plastics, though there are high quality bits also, it being a mixed bag, I actually prefer the ambiance and the interior design while driving because everything is much closer, though the EV9 has better ergonomics. You just feel like you're more cocooned in a cockpit, and also that along with the driving position being so much better. I mean, I'm sitting now comfortable, I even have, the back reclined a little bit, but I can still easily place my wrist on top of the rim, and it just is so much better from behind the wheel driving this in that sense, because you don't feel like you're hunched over driving a bus. And these seats are also superior. My elbow hits the armrest here perfect, and also on the door. I think like from a day-to-day perspective, I prefer driving this. And also the steering feel is much more natural. This is light off center, and then it weights up as you move the mass of the car onto the wheels. The EV9 does the opposite. I'm more on that later. But once you get going, it is very apparent that this is on a much older platform that is not a dedicated EV platform with a lot more limitations. The way this drives, it's just much more wafty. Yes, initially it has a little bit of that waft going down a stretch of road where it does feel comfortable, and it actually masks the weight pretty nicely. But this is on smaller wheels, so more sidewall. And once you get going on a road that's a little bit choppy, this suspension and this platform just doesn't hold up to the EV9. It just gives up completely. And this also has basically no sporting credentials, even if you put it into sport mode. There's no air suspension here. Are there adaptive dampers? Does it feel more stiff? Yeah, possibly. But I wasn't able to find any information about adaptive dampers, or I don't know. It just has this bounciness. It just doesn't rest on its suspension. But maybe from a day-to-day perspective, because of these seats and the driving position, I think I prefer this, but for everything else, like going on a long trip, like road noise is a lot more apparent in this car. I did a measurement in my range test, and yeah, this is substantially louder, both tire noise and road noise, compared to that EV9. And also, yes, this does have more horsepower and is quicker on paper, but like, it's still 2.6 tons. And from having 517 horsepower, it doesn't feel fast. Or do you have to put this into sport to get all of that power? Let's see. Sport, there we go. No, pickup is still slow. It's by no means a fast car. It has 517 horsepower because it needs it. And it feels far from doing 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.9 seconds, if I'm going to be completely honest. Immediately from behind the wheel of the EV9, this feels like a much more refined and luxurious product. The platform here feels so much more substantial and hefty. And I'm not talking about that it feels heavier, it just feels like a much more solid product. It feels like a German car in that regard. It is very impressive. And also suspension noise, wind noise, and tire noise is so much more suppressed, especially at lower speeds compared to that BYD Tang. At higher speeds, at motorway speeds, the difference is smaller, though there is a noticeable difference when I did my instrumented testing in my range test. And also, the way this changes direction, the way it controls its mass is so impressive. That is probably due to this being on a dedicated EV platform, and also the battery pack probably being lower, giving this car a lower center of gravity, and this having a longer wheelbase at 3.1 meters. It's just better to drive in every regard. Well, almost every regard. I wish this was just a little bit softer setup because it does get a little bit choppy and busy over bad pavement. And also the steering is just strange in this car. It's heavy off center. And then once it weights up, there's no sense of the body mass. Like, it's the same weight if you go 3 kilometers through a bend with a 3 degree turn, or if you go through a 90-degree bend at 100 kilometers an hour, there's the same amount of weight. So there's absolutely no feedback through the steering wheel, and it's just weird. I don't like it at all. But maybe the worst thing about this car, in my opinion, like the reason I really don't love it, is because of this driving position. Yes, the cabin does look nice, but also it feels like I'm driving a bus. Look how, upright the seat back is. And even with that upright seat back, and I feel like I'm close to the dashboard, there's just not enough reach in the steering wheel. I feel like I have to drive like this. And that combined with everything being so far away and it being so airy, and you just having, this big slab of dashboard in gray plastic compared to that BYD Tang where you feel like you're cocooned in a cockpit. Yeah, I just don't jive with this car as much as I would like. But technically, it's better, it drives better, it's more quiet, it's more comfortable, it's more refined. I just don't get a good feeling from behind the steering wheel. It's hard to explain. I hope this makes sense, guys. I think in isolation, the BYD Tang is actually a very appealing package. I really like the driving position, I like the interior, I like the fact that it's much more cozy sitting in behind the steering wheel, driving this. It feels more like a luxury product than this. Also, it drives a little bit more traditional. I just prefer this from a day-to-day perspective. But for everything else, like practicality, looks, the ergonomics, the space, the long trip capability, the range, the charging speed, I think if you can afford it, I would absolutely stretch my budget to get a less equipped EV9 than a fully equipped BYD Tang. This is just a better vehicle overall for most people. But if you don't have that budget where you can't stretch to what this costs, then I think the Tang, if you don't need all the carrying capacity as you do with this, and you don't go on a lot of long trips, so you don't need that range, you don't need that fast charging speed, I think this actually isn't a bad vehicle. So guys, let me know what you think down below. EV9 or BYD Tang. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below. And for more car content, as always, please subscribe. See you guys later and goodbye.